The National Museum of Funeral History presents The Final Curtain Never Closes. I'm your host, Genevieve Keeney Vasquez, the president and CEO of the museum. Today I have a wonderful guest with me, a colleague in the profession. I have Lisa Bowie with me, who's a funeral director and has been a licensed funeral director since 1979. And she is also currently the author of Wake Up Calls, a journey of learning to lead and succeed in the funeral and death care profession. And it is currently on Amazon's bestseller list. And it just came out in September, the beginning of September. So that is a wonderful achievement, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be with you, Genevieve.
Well, I understand that, you are a funeral director, have been in the profession for many, many years. I was actually 9 years old when you entered into the profession.
Oh, no.
So, I know us women never tell our age, right? But
no, we don't. But I'll tell you, I've been in the profession and licensed for 46 years. So in the profession a little bit longer, but licensed probably about 6 months after I started. It took a while, but.
So are you a generational funeral director?
I am. I'm third generation. My grandfather started our business in 1935 in St. Charles, Missouri. And he came over from Southern Illinois and worked the trade and learned from another undertaker back in the day is what they called it. He was a salesman, a shoe salesman in St. Louis. And he always wanted to have a profession or a trade. So he saw this guy with a really nice suit and some nice shoes. And he said, I want to be like him. So he went off and studied under him, and then eventually his pastor introduced him to a man in St. Charles who owned a lumber company, and they got together because the lumber company guy always wanted to be an undertaker. Lumber companies back in the day would make caskets and so forth, but he never did that, and he thought, I really want to do this. So he was studied under him, and Mr. Heckman had the money, my grandfather had the know-how, and they opened the first a third funeral home, actually, in a little town in St. Charles, Missouri. It was very tiny back then. Eventually, they bought out their Protestant competitor. Eventually, they bought out their Catholic competitor, and they became the largest provider in the St. Charles area. And then,
congratulations!
Retired, it was cool. It was fun growing the business. My dad came in next. I spent my first year of life at Mortuary school in Dallas, Texas, where my dad was studying, and then lived above the funeral home for a little while. I was just an infant at the time, and then had our own home. Grew up across the street going to school there, and spent many, many days and nights and vacations above the funeral home in my grandparents' living quarters.
Yes, so you truly are from the traditional generational funeral profession, the whole concept of living above the funeral home. We don't see that much anymore.
We don't.
And it's so interesting that you were saying that your grandfather was a shoe salesman, because many times when I was talking about how in Colorado there wasn't any licensure requirements, I would always kind of use the analogy of you could be a shoe salesman today and a funeral director tomorrow. And here you're telling me this story about your grandfather. And I'm like, wow, isn't that funny? Because I use that as an analogy. But I think that's
there were no
interesting.
Mortuary schools. When he was coming in, there were no mortuary schools in our area. So even if they existed back then, I don't know. Back in the 30s, possibly. But he did his mortuary school training under another undertaker in St. Louis who taught him gravity embalming. And his embalming room was in the cellar of a 2-story old brick home on this little side street. And he would open the big doors to the cellar and have to go down a set of stairs to get to his area where he did gravity embalming in the beginning before everything else, arterial embalming and all those kind of things all really started with the embalming machines. I mean, those were not really in existence back, at least in my grandfather's area. So
and actually we have that equipment on display at the museum. So you can actually see a gravity embalming vessel, if you will. And so, if you're ever wanting to understand more about what Lisa is talking about or referring to. It is, back in the 1930s embalming lab that we have kind of set up, and it shows the gravity bottle. It shows the machines that we now use for arterial embalming and everything. So it's pretty fascinating that, that that we have been able to capture that historical event that really kind of, helped to pave the way in our profession.
It did, yeah. And it's so, I never got to see that machine because it was gone by the time I was growing up. And I had always wished that Grandpa had kept his old equipment. We have old kneelers and some old Catholic setup kind of things and church trucks and so forth that we retained. But it was, that wasn't there. I was so sad.
Oh.
But, back then they didn't think to always keep all those things and they stopped using them.
Yeah, that's true. And that, that's how the museum came to be, because a lot of the items of the historical tools that were used were being discarded, and it, needed to be captured and kind of like frozen, if you will, in history. So we could continue to tell the story and how things evolved over time. So it's so great to hear from you, because you basically are just, putting the reality of how the profession started into the story that is being told at the museum. So I love that. Thank you for that validation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I love to listen to my ancestors' stories about how they had the first air conditioning unit. Pop had the first air conditioning unit in St. Charles, and he put it downstairs in the parlors. And my dad used to say, I never understood why the dead people got the air conditioning when we were upstairs sweating. So the kids would come and sleep outside the parlors with their pillows and blankets just to stay cool in the hot summers. And the deceased were right next door, right there in the parlor, and they were out in the hallway with their pillows and blankets to stay cool. Things like that. We don't even imagine, because Missouri is very, very hot and very humid. Yeah. So it was really not, I'm sure, a comfortable place to sleep in during summer nights. So
yeah, but people have to understand that keeping the bodies cool was definitely more important, to help retard the decomposition process. So
correct.
Definitely needed that cool air.
They did, even with embalming. Well, and the flowers too. I mean, the flowers would.
Oh yeah,
so, you got to think about the flowers all in the rooms, and flowers were huge back then, and as a symbol of love, and so yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, all these different little details in our industry, and they all have a purpose. Because at the end, it's basically preserving everything so that we can create that beautiful celebration of that life for the family, and they can have that final moment, and everything has to be perfect, right?
It does. I was raised in a family of perfectionists, and believe me, they used to call my grandmother. In fact, a little bit about this is in my book. She was a white glove lady, and she would come around, and every time she visited back when I was a young funeral director, she would constantly be looking for dust, and she would run her finger along the chair boards and on tables, and if anything was amiss, we would hear about it. Right? She'd go in and inspect the bathrooms, even when she got older in her walker. Nana was there doing the inspection of the building, because she was always in charge of the beautification and the furniture and the housekeeping. Mm-hmm. And, in the early days, she was raising children, so they had to hire a housekeeper to help with all the parlors. But she had a beautiful tea service set out. She would serve the families tea and coffee. There's an old video showing her doing that was kind of like a commercial that they did. And my grandmother was just one of these women that did not go out without her hair done, always had her makeup on, very coiffed, in style and suit. And I just loved watching her as a child, and always said, someday I want to be like her. Now, my mother was also quite beautiful and very well dressed as well. And I ended up growing up a little bit more of a tomboy, and the two of them struggled getting me in a dress. Business suits for women weren't really prevalent back then, but I remember an old photograph of my grandparents along with their co-owners, the Hackmans, before Mr. Hackman died, standing in front of the funeral home in their white suits. So imagine this. It's a white building with this beautiful Victorian arch above them and a sunburst kind of through the window. And here they are standing on the front porch. And all four of them were in their white suits. Now, how they changed from white to black, I don't know. And I've always wanted to ask them, and forgot, never knew until years later that photograph even existed. But I was curious as to, okay, we have white suits. Did we wear white suits in the summer and black suits in the winter?
That could be a possibility. Yeah. Maybe it was seasonal. Mm-hmm.
I can't.
That makes most sense.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Well, and there used to be a company, I think it was in Australia. They were called the White Ladies, and they all wore white suits, and they were funeral directors.
Oh.
It was a funeral home over there, someplace in Australia, I believe. And kind of an interesting concept about what we wear today versus what they wore back then.
Yeah, we our wardrobe as funeral directors has changed quite drastically, and the expectation, right? One of the things that I always get as a female mortician is you don't look like a funeral director.
I know. I had a priest come in one time and he goes, "You look like a damn flight attendant or stewardess." I think he called me a stewardess. And I'm like, well, Father Schmaltz, I mean, I'm a funeral director, but my dad makes me wear a skirt. So we wear navy blue suits back then. So I have to look like the rest of the guys except in a skirt. Well, you still look like a damn stewardess. I was, what do you do with this guy, right? So I go to my dad. I was like, did I upset him for some reason? He goes, no, he's just not used to women being in the business. He'll get over it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, not used to having women in the business. That is truly it's a mark. It's an inevitable historical mark in this industry because funeral directing was predominantly a male profession. And now we are really starting to see more and more women coming into the industry and becoming the funeral director, the mortician. And it's a movement.
It is a movement,
to say the least. It
is a movement. Yeah. And that's why we started Funeral Women Lead, the foundation that kicked off last March and will soon become a 501c3 foundation. We're super excited about it and all the programs we're going to offer women because there are more and more women coming into the profession. And as I started my coaching company back in 2021, that was a long time ago, in 2021, this year, that year I felt like women were really in need coming out of the pandemic. And some of these young women were telling me about the environment they were still working in. And it sounded just like the environment I grew up in. And Genevieve, I couldn't believe that we were so behind. I thought, surely with a 75% graduation rate that ABFSE reported last year, that are female graduates, right, out of all the accredited mortuary schools, you would think we would be embracing women at a better level than we are.
I know.
It's just not there.
Couldn't believe it. When I was working on the cremation exhibit, I was on a kind of like a little road trip collecting artifacts, and I went into one of them, a predominantly male-run funeral home, and the funeral director there was looking at me and talking, and he was telling me a story about how the women belong in a skirt behind a typewriter. And I thought, oh my gosh. I was like, the shallowness. He was like, no, women have a position of being the secretary of the funeral home, not the director of the funeral home. And I was really aghast that he still had that mindset of not embracing the professionalism of the women in the industry and the contribution that we have to the industry.
Right. It's so crazy. We used to do some trade work for our assistants on funerals for other funeral homes in the St. Louis area back in the day. And so we would go over and bring them a hearse or a limousine and just drive it in their funerals. But I was not allowed to do that at this one particular funeral home because he didn't allow women to drive cars. And women were to sit in the car and be escorted. They could not walk down the aisle, even if they were licensed, regardless of whether they were a funeral director or went to mortuary school. In Missouri, we have a split license. And so I would drive the car over there, and I'd sit around in their lounge and twiddle my thumbs, read a trade magazine, something like that. So finally, one day he called, and he was slammed. And I was it. That's all he had. And he needed a driver and a hearse. And I said, well, sir, I'm it. I said, you can have me. I will drive your hearse, and no, women aren't allowed. I said, still, and this was probably another 5-6 years after I started, and I was licensed and experienced in driving hearses, stop backing them into garages and making dents in I was a good driver. Yeah. And no, he would not allow me. So I went to my dad and I said, look, you need to end this relationship with this guy because I'm not even allowed to drive at all. And I'm tired of sitting in his lounge and wasting my time when this man won't even recognize that women have the ability to drive a hearse. I've been driving
Yeah.
station wagons, limousines, hearses, you name it, all my life.
And
I can tractors. Give me a
yeah,
riding
and
a horse.
I'm sure you've driven the family car, right?
Oh yeah, we had
Yes. I mean,
big family cars.
yeah,
They were all
yeah,
league cars
yeah.
or
So,
station wagons. Yeah.
yeah.
So it still exists today. It's really kind of sad. I would say we probably have about 10% of the funeral homes in the profession today that are embracing women and helping them grow. A lot of the corporates are starting to change. There's two of the large corporations now have women CEOs.
Hmm.
I think it's is it Everstory and Park Lawn. And we see women executives at the executive level of our associations. All of the organizations in the U.S. are led by women executives, except for one. All of them. And
Wow,
so
that's amazing.
they've embraced it, and most of their staff, a lot of their staff and senior staff are all women. So
Yeah.
what's happening inside the funeral homes has not caught up with today's corporate world. Although if you look at stats and you read a lot about the corporate world, women are still not in the C-suite at the numbers that they should be. Their pay equity has some challenges, and we are hearing from women in the profession, even though there are no statistics in that regards, that still exists in our profession quite a bit. Just getting an apprenticeship with a wage that's livable is unfortunately not great. And that's why we started the women organization, Funeral Women Lead, that to help these women gain their confidence so they can speak up, to help them be able to advocate for themselves, to be able to help grow themselves as leaders. We have a Women's Leadership Academy coming up this November. It kicks off on the 16th and 17th of November. Then it goes online all year round, and they graduate the following year. And in that academy, we will be working on women's self-confidence, women's self-esteem, helping them become a leader from the inside out, using the emotional intelligence quota book, EQ, and really helping them find their place and their brand and their voice. Because women need to speak up louder and more, and they need to feel supported. So there'll be a supportive community that will continue past the Leadership Academy. And then we also have our Wellness Summit following that, Genevieve. The Wellness Summit is designed to help women both with their wellness physically, mentally, and spiritually as business women. And they'll be learning skills as women, how to empower themselves, how to grow themselves as leaders, and how to use that growth for the positive in the profession and their own personal life. So we're real excited to be bringing these things to funeral service, and it's based on what women are telling us they need. And we're finding that women still aren't in the majority in association leadership. We have very little data on that. We found out from NFDA that they've had 7 women on its board of directors in their history since 1882,
Wow.
despite their staff being 72% female. Here's the other cool thing, though. Ellen McBrayer is now going to be one of those women to go up the chairs and become the first female president. But think about the numbers. Since 1882, they have had 0 women go up the chairs in leadership in our national association. Some of the others have had 1 or 2, 3 or 4 max women as chairman of their boards or president of their associations. It's very slow growth, very slow movement. And why is that? People say, why? Well, if you think about women and what happens in our early life, we maybe get married, or maybe we have a companion, or maybe we want children, or our life just gets busy in funeral service. Do we have time to volunteer for association membership and growth as a leader? Not necessarily, because that work-life balance gets in the way and our priorities have to change. How do men find the time to do it? Well, are men really the caretakers of the home? Are they the caretakers of the children? Back in the day, and even today, we're seeing less of that, and women don't have the support that they need at home so that they can become part of these organizations and grow themselves as leaders. We'll see them come in probably in their late 30s to early 40s as they start gravitating. Now, more and more are coming. They're trying to serve on committees. Sometimes they're being shut down. They're being told, and this is a true story, they're being told, well, you won't make a difference on this state association board, because most of our members are men and they won't listen to you. Or I'm hearing women say, gosh, I've been told in job interviews that don't plan on having any children because you aren't going to have time. And
that gentleman. That gentleman that when I was on that journey of getting artifacts for the cremation exhibit, that was one of the things he did mention. He said, "Oh, and if you plan on having children, I'm not going to hire you." And I was like, really? Well,
that's illegal, first of all.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think he was referring to probably about 15 years prior. He was just kind of making his stance known of how he felt about women in the profession.
Yeah.
And I was pretty appalled. And I also had a personal experience just shortly after I had graduated mortuary school. And it was during an alumni gathering at the museum. And I sat down at a table of gentlemen who had funeral homes in the South. And he had no reservation at all to sit there and look at me and tell me, if you apply for a job at my funeral home, I will not hire you because you are a female. I was aghast. I was like, what did you say? I was like, wait, I thought that we were past all of that. It's just like, I had a personal experience myself in that regard of being told that I would do not apply because I will not get in. Right, and then, being at the museum, I began there as a female, as the director of the museum. And for a very long time, I was the only female on our board. We were a male dominated board. We still are today. However, we are getting more females in our board, which is amazing. We're getting more diversity in our board, which is amazing. And, like I said, for a long time, I was the only female. And I always kind of chuckle because I told my dad, I said, why is it that I choose male dominant professions? I was in the Army for 12 years and that's heavily dominated by males as well. And here we are females breaking into these male professions, and we're shouting and striving and trying to prove ourselves, just for equality, right? To be looked at just as professional as the men, that we can do the same thing a man can do, just to at least give us an opportunity and a chance to show you.
Right.
And we are seeing that women are really good funeral directors. And I think it's because of it's because of our innate nurturing abilities and our ability to be compassionate.
Right. And sometimes that holds us back in leadership. And so that's one of the things they'll learn at our Leadership Academy. That's one of the things as we continue a leadership community and a wellness community, because we don't believe in one and done. At Funeral Women Lead, we'll be continuing to stay in touch and forming communities where women can feel supported, because we use our heart a lot. And I mentioned that in my book, Wake Up Calls, is that we have to learn to use our head, our heart, and our grit. And surely in the Army, you learned some grit, right? I learned a lot of gritty lessons from my grandfather. I was the oldest grandchild, from getting bucked off Shetland ponies to getting my hands dirty, learning to hunt, and all the things that we had to do back in the day. My grandfather exposed me to everything, and he didn't care if I was a girl or a boy. He says, "Now, you want to hang out on this farm?" Because he had a farm as a vacation home. He goes, "You got to pull your weight around here. So, get back on that pony, get back on that horse when you get bucked off." So we learned some grit back in the day, and they might call it resilience today, Genevieve. But we learned to stand up for ourselves, and maybe we had those good, strong role models that supported us in being able to do that. I come from a very outspoken, strong, dominant German family, and on one side I have a grandfather who's a mortician, on the other, and dad, and on the other side I have a grandfather who is a doctor and started the first hospital in a little town in Illinois, and grandmother was a nurse. I mean, these people see it all. My grandpa rode horseback in World War I.
Wow.
For the Canadian and the English and the American armies. And, that was back in the day when they didn't have anything but their horse, their backpack, and they're taking care of people out in the field. So somehow we were either genetically inherent or we've been taught over the years that you can do anything you want regardless of your gender. And that's what we need to help women with today, because they are coming into our profession as caregivers, using their heart, most of them, because there was a death in their life and they were affected by that death. They're not necessarily family members originally, which is awesome to see. I love to see more and more females come in, and they're using their hearts, but then their hearts are getting broken. And that's one of the concerns I have. I speak to that in my book, Wake Up Calls, because using your heart at the same time you use your head and allowing your grit to rise and having that resilience inside of you, learning and resilience can be learned, by the way. You can learn to become more gritty. You just need support and encouragement and learn to become fearless. So that is something we have to do ourselves. And that comes from self-esteem and learning to have courage and not worrying about what other people think of us.
Yes, exactly.
And so, exactly. And that is, we were raised in a generation, and these young women as well, is to worry about what others think as a caregiver, right? We want to care for people, so it's important we show them we care. But at the other side of this is also a place where we have to grow stronger in our self-esteem and our self-assurance and our ability to speak up when we have men that say to us, well, don't plan on working for me if you want to have babies. Well,
yeah, exactly.
Certainly I won't work for you because I intend to have my children. I nursed my babies at the funeral home. We had hand pumps instead of electric pumps back in the day.
Yeah.
I'm putting my breast milk in the freezer. The guys are opening it up going, what's this? I go, don't touch that. That's my baby's food. Right? Or you're having a congregation rise as we get up to leave and go to the cemetery, and all of a sudden it's feeding time. Boy, you're running upstairs and you're changing your bra and your shirt and your blouse. And these are things men don't get, but women get it. Women get that. And so that's one of the reasons we started.
We're good at multitasking too. I think that is an innate ability that we also have. But I wanted to make a comment back to your when you were talking about how we lead with our heart and how we're nurturers but leaders at the same time. And when I was in the military, I remember quite distinctly as a sergeant and having soldiers underneath me that I had to mentor and discipline at the same time. I had one of the male sergeants who was a colleague of mine come up to me and tell me, quite frankly, he said, "You are too mommy-ish." And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, you baby your soldiers. And I was like, no, I just have a different leadership style than you do. And my soldiers are well behaved and they respect me. So there's a difference in leadership. And in that moment, that was like an aha moment. I could have taken that personally. I could have internalized that and backed down and allowed myself to close in and shift my leadership style, which I think could have been for the worse, because that's not how my soldiers came to know me and my leadership abilities. And I could have allowed that comment from that male to shift my personal beliefs on how I wanted to lead my soldiers. And
awesome.
And looking back on that, I was like, you know what? No, I stood up to him and I said, you know what? So what? So be it. That's my leadership style. I'm sorry if yours is different. But in that same moment, I walked back and I was like, you know what? His soldiers don't respect him the way mine do.
Oh, that's cool. That's an incredible story. I can so relate to that. I did not have the training that you did in the Army in my growing up years. And when my dad died, I was 30 years old. It was 1987. Yeah. And he was 53. So my dad was just an amazing leader and caregiver of people. He was a middle child. He was not top-down dominant. And I didn't know how to be a good leader of people. I had no training. And that's one of the reasons we started the Leadership Academy. And I speak to it in my book because I went through some major wake-up calls. Like you had that experience with that gentleman and you already had found your leadership style. I hadn't found mine yet. I mean, I was 30 years old, right? So it was really until I was close to my 40s or early 40s that I started realizing, Lisa, you're not a good leader. You've got a high rate of turnover. You've got unions coming in, trying to unionize. People aren't feeling loved and cared for. What's wrong with you? And I blamed myself. I went to a leadership conference and a retreat, kind of like what our Leadership Academy is going to be doing both now and in the future, where I was with like kind and learned more and more about how to be a good leader. And John Maxwell was one of the first books we read, his 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I took it seriously. And I had this business coach come in. I had him do a 360 on me, and I found out I was not using my heart in my leadership. I was more focused on my customers and my bottom line instead of my staff. And until I changed, nothing in the culture at Bowie's was going to. And it was a real wake-up call for me when I started focusing on using my heart and showing my heart, which I thought, as a tough German girl, I'm in this profession. I got to act like the guys. I got to be one of the guys. That was not working back home inside of Bowie. They needed to see my compassion and my heart and my love and my care for them as much as I was giving to the families we were serving. And that's where I think funeral service still has it wrong. We are so focused. And if you look at all the webinars and all the seminars out there, they're talking about some retention, recruitment. Well, we better be talking to these owners about what they're going to do to better care for their staff. And until they get the care for the staff piece right, they're going to continue to lose people. And I will tell you that I think the attrition rate is very, very low in funeral service for females. Back in 2019, there was a research study done through the ABFSE and the University of Oklahoma, and it showed clearly that of the 1,700 plus students that were no longer practicing as funeral directors after 5 years, within 5 years of graduation, there was a 28% attrition rate. Okay, so that seems kind of low. It seems like, okay, that's not too bad, right? We're keeping a lot more than we're losing. But of those in 2019, 55% were female, 45% male. And of the students that were no longer there, the larger majority were women, 33%, and 22% were men. So if you take that study, and there needs to be a new study, by the way, the ABFSE has been approached to redo that study. We haven't seen any movement on it, but a couple of mortuary school presidents and I are trying to get them to do this. We believe that the attrition rate is even higher for women today because I'm hearing from employers, I can't keep people. They're leaving. They're not staying. Well, why is that?
Yeah.
Well, what's going on? What does your schedule look like? What does your HR programs look like? How are you helping them grow as leaders? How are you caring for them? How are you helping them find that work-life balance and deal with burnout? And burnout is still very, very real. And the employers are saying in these conferences, I'm so tired of hearing a program about burnout. Well, okay, you as owners may not be experiencing burnout, but your people certainly are. And since the pandemic, it's gotten worse and worse. So why is it we only see at NFDA, through their member survey in 24, 76% members are male and 24% are female. Women are not coming to NFDA in the droves that they should be. Right? And of that group of the owners, 86% are male and 13% are female. We don't even have women as owners. So everybody's out there going, oh my gosh, we're going to have this huge, major exodus of baby boomer owners and no buyers. Well, guess what? There's only 13% female owners in NFDA. I bet there's a lot of women out there that would love to become a funeral home owner. What are we doing to teach them to become managers and owners of tomorrow? So our Leadership Academy is going to address that. We'll be having strategic planning session this November, and we're going to be talking more and more about what should we be doing to better support women to help them with their growth so that they can become the managers, leaders, and owners of tomorrow. Because if 75% graduation rate exists, are female today, what's happening to them? First of all, we don't know how long they're lasting. Secondly, we know because we listen and we hear from scholarship winners and everyone else that we talk to, all these young women, that they are not being encouraged and sent out to NFDA. And there's scholarships available. They're not being encouraged to go and to other association events. They're not, because the owners are saying, oh, well, I'm not going to spend the money on them. Or if I send them, they might go to work for someone else. So they're afraid to send them. These women, I serve on the Funeral Service Foundation board as well. And we have a scholarship named after my dad because he was a big proponent and started the first women's program. So it's the David C. Bowie Memorial Scholarship. We give about 20 scholarships a year, our family does, to help women attend Professional Women's Conference with NFDA. And we do that because we know and hear the stories. For the last 5 years since the pandemic, I couldn't be here if you hadn't provided this scholarship. My employer will not give me time off. I had to take my own personal PTO. And if I didn't have that additional stipend of $500 to travel with, I couldn't have afforded to even personally come, even though the scholarship pays for your tuition and your hotel and your meals.
Wow.
So this is really sad that today, in 2025, this still exists, that these employers won't send these women out to become the future leaders of tomorrow. Invest in your people is what I would love them to hear. And in my book, I have two audiences. One are the females that are growing up that we hope will get some inspiration from this book, help learn to use their head and their heart, and become more gritty. And there's lessons after each chapter, Genevieve, where they're reflections, and you can use these in book clubs, you can use these in staff meetings, you can ask questions about their own grief and loss experiences, and you can get to know and support your people better. But also, if you're not feeling supported, it's my goal that this Wake Up Call book will help you feel more supported. And I also list in here all the different associations and the scholarships available that are out there in our profession, which we will also be doing Funeral Women Lead on our website, to try to encourage women to take better care of themselves, to be advocates for themselves, and to grow themselves as leaders. Because if your employer won't do it, then you have a responsibility, if you want to be in this profession and be successful, that you have to step out there and do it yourself. You know, there's a couple of great books in there out there about doing it yourself, but I have a little poem I wrote in here about doing it anyway. And it's pretty powerful. It's in the chapter, The Little Dead Girl and Hope for the Future. And it's on page 159. So may I read it?
Yes, please do.
Okay. All right. So these are a few words to help you remain strong and find your grit. If you are faced with self-doubt and you want to quit, lift yourself up anyway. If you are struggling in your education and you feel way behind, continue to learn anyway. If you want to defend yourself and your heart has been hurt, remain strong and open your heart anyway. If you want to succeed and you need real support, seek help anyway. If you seek to become a leader but feel you have nowhere to turn, seek others to teach you and become a leader anyway. If you feel your voice has been silenced and you have something to say, speak up anyway. If you are not sure whether you will ever reach your dream, keep reaching for it anyway. And I wrote this, and actually it's kind of a takeoff of Kit Keith's poem, Do It Anyway, and a similar poem written by Mother Teresa. I wrote this for all the young people in funeral service, whether they're male or female, no matter how they identify, it doesn't matter. What matters is don't give up on our profession. It is a wonderful profession to work in. You can use your heart to serve families all day long, but you also have to use your head and find your grit to succeed and stay in here. You have to become more resilient. It's not easy. It's not a 9-to-5 business. There's nights and holidays that you work. I mean, I can't tell you the Christmases that I sat with a family who one wife just wanted to be with her husband on Christmas. And she was alone in St. Charles and had no family there. So, you know what? I got up and put on my suit and sat with her and let her have time with her husband that day. That's what you do as a funeral director, right? It's not a 9-to-5 job.
It's a 24/7 job.
It is. But you also need your breaks. You got to find them. You have to learn. And we're going to teach that at our wellness summit about how to find those breaks and better take care of yourself. And then we'll have a wellness community that continues on past the summit. Even if you can't make our summit this year, we want you to be part of our wellness community because you have a responsibility to yourself to better care for you. You won't survive in this business without doing that.
Yeah. So will your summits be annually?
We hope so. And if there's a stronger demand in the future, maybe we have to have more than one. or we'll find a larger venue. So we hope to go to the
Great.
East Coast next time. We're a little west. We're in Scottsdale, Arizona this year. Tried to find a nice little place. It's the Hilton Resort, a Scottsdale Resort and Spa by Hilton. So there, we want to find a place where if you want to get a massage, if you want to go hiking or biking, want to just lay by the pool, it's warm enough to do that in November in Scottsdale. And we believe we need to take care of ourselves. And I got to tell you one story about this. So we had a woman that I met at a recent conference who said, my employer won't send me because he doesn't like the fact that you've got some hours in the afternoon break time for me to relax and go enjoy, maybe get a massage or take a hike or go lay by the pool and just contemplate how I want to focus on my wellness. He won't send me because he doesn't like the fact that I'm not in a class every single hour while I'm there. She goes, but I'm going to come anyway. I said, well,
it's called self-care, right? You got to have self-care embedded into not only, I think, the educational portion of it, but it's teaching you that in your day-to-day life, you've got to have self-care. And this is the importance of it. You know, sometimes, I mean, I'm guilty of it. I was one of those, you know, nonstop, you know, workaholics, just kept going.
Oh, me
and
too.
when I would stop to do a self-care moment, whether it was a massage, whether it was getting my nails done, whether it was just reading a book or going for a hike, it was very uncomfortable for me. I felt like I was out of my skin, felt guilty, I just felt off, like something wasn't right. It was like, I felt like my comfort zone was, you know, hard charging, working all the time. And I think that is a learned skill that we as women or anybody, you know, in the profession, outside of the profession, we need to learn self-care, and it's important. And when I lived in Europe, they had this thing called the Cure. And the employers supported it. And it was 2 weeks out of the year that if you felt that you know, were just overworked, burned out, you would apply for it with your employer and they would send you on the Cure. And it was 2 weeks at a spa. And all you did was self-care for 2 weeks. And then you would come back to work refreshed. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it still goes on. And the employer has to pay for everything, and you have to be paid while you're there. And so there's an importance to teaching people that even if you're in a leadership role, you have to have boundaries and you have to take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. You can't take care of your family. You can't take care of your clients. You can't take care of your you know, your business.
That's right.
If you can't learn that boundary.
And you can't grow yourself as a leader because you'll be exhausted and you will not be a good leader of yourself, much less others. You know what happened to this young woman? She went back and she told her boss she was going to go anyway, and he wouldn't let her.
Oh, no.
Right. She contacted me and she goes, I am so sad. I am so sorry. He will not give me time off, and I'd have to use my vacation to come. She goes, I even told him I'd pay for it myself. And this is a supplier, by the way, not a funeral company. And I was still I was just, my heart just broke for her. And I said, well, I hope to see you next year. But we're not going to fill curriculum all day long so that you don't get any breaks. That is not right. I said to her, well, does he ever go on conferences where he goes golfing? Like in the morning,
exactly.
And then maybe goes to some afternoon things. So guys can go golfing and go to this whole golf thing, and their company will pay for it. But they won't pay for a woman to come and work on her well-being. And you know, Kate Collins, if we still have some room by the time this podcast comes out, check with us. Even if the hotel is full, we'll make room for you in the Wellness Summit. We may have a neighboring resort that you have to stay at, but it's right next door. It's easy to get to because there's a lot of resorts all around us. But we have Kate Collins coming for a 4-hour retreat, business and leadership and wellness retreat. She's going to be teaching tools for managing stress and self-doubt, how to own your power and bring your best self forward. She'll have inner coaching strategies that help you transform that inner critic. And she's going to teach us to lead with greater resilience, courage, and confidence. Now, what employer would not want that for their women? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then we have an integrative healthcare physician coming who's going to talk about the physical wellness and empowering strategies for our optimal health and longevity. And then our closing keynote is with Marguerite Ham, who's just amazing in the areas of growth, wellness, and helping us plan our goals for the future. She's also a certified leadership coach and certified in mindfulness. And so we've got a well-rounded program planned, Genevieve. I hope you can come.
I'm going to plan on it. I'm going to plan on, because, I have to say that, I'm in a leadership role, and, sometimes we're in a leadership role, and we sit back and we contemplate, and we're like, okay, how can this apply to me? Don't sit back and think, oh, I know it all. And you were talking about how I got my leadership skills in the Army. Well, my leadership skills in the Army are not the same leadership skills I use in running the museum.
Correct.
It's a different, my staff is different. They come from a different background. I can't lead them with a firm fist, if you will, like you can in the military, right? Because that's an expectation. You got to be strong. You got to be firm. But it's a totally different leadership style that I had to learn. But you know what? I can always get better. I can always improve. And listening to you in this podcast, I have realized that there is still a lot there for me to grow. I still have many years ahead of me as a leader, and I'm really looking forward to trying to get my schedule arranged so I can be a part of this, because I think it's important not only for the women in the industry, people coming up in the industry, but for people who are already leaders within the industry.
Right. Oh, and something new we just added to our website is called a support kit. So in this support kit, you won't have this problem because you are your employer, right? Pretty much you report to a board, but some people do. But there's a whole bullet point area where you can actually tell your employer what you're going to learn and how to speak to them. And it has a fact sheet and everything, both for the Women's Leadership Academy as well as the Wellness Summit. So there's support kits for both programs. So you can use that support kit, hopefully, to convince your employer to send you. And if not, what I would tell you is, if you can make an investment in yourself, if you can swing it this year, do it anyway. Next year, as we raise more funds, and I know, Genevieve, you're a master at raising money. I'm gonna pick your brain like crazy, because our foundation intends to raise more money. So next year we hope to have some really great scholarships for this program too.
Oh, that'll be amazing. And I really hope that there is, that's a summit. I feel the importance of this just through listening to you today, at how this needs to be a part of all females in the industry, coming up in the industry, and people who are out. They may not be a funeral director or a mortician. They might be in a supplier role in supporting the industry.
They might be a death doula. They might be in hospice. It doesn't matter. If you're connected in death care in any shape, way, or form, we women need to come together and be together in funeral service and death care. I say both because they're a little different in different associations, how you refer to it. I was a cemeterian. I owned a cremation society. I had funeral homes. I had a pet business. It doesn't matter what part of our industry you belong to.
And I run the National Museum of Funeral History. So
that's exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're an executive director, and you should be there. That's what I think.
And so, I definitely want to say, however I can advocate for this amazing program, this amazing concept for the women in the industry, sign me up. I am there for you. I want to help make this summit be an annual thing. I think it should be an annual event.
Well, we believe it will. We just brought Patty Newswanger, our new senior director of operations, on board. She is a former senior vice president of education and events for NFDA. She's amazing. Patty and I have known each other for probably 20 years. And she is a go-getter. This will happen, Genevieve. We're going to be growing more and more. So you can go online and become a free charter supporter and follow us, so you'll always know. Get our newsletter. We have over 3,300, mostly females in our that are following us in our newsletter group. And we will be having niche communities. Maybe there'll be one for executive directors. I know there's one in 26 being planned for women veterans in
Oh,
the
very
funeral,
nice.
right, in the funeral service. So might be of interest to you. I was talking to someone yesterday, Amy Cunningham, who would love to see us start one for women in the green burial area of our profession. We can see communities from death doulas to cemeterians to cremationists. There's a lot of women I met at Cana that are like, oh, it's so great. I'd like to meet other women who are a cremationist like me. They come up to me and say, well, I'm not in funeral service. I'm a cremationist. I said, well, you are in funeral service.
Yeah. You're still part of the.
You're serving families when they choose cremation. You're caring for the deceased. That is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
But it also doesn't come without stress. So what can we better do to support them, right?
Exactly. So here's our call to action, right? We're asking all the women out there in this industry and is in the support element of this industry, wherever you think you may fall, even if you think you don't belong, reach out to Lisa, reach out to her organization, ask if your profession is still part of the big umbrella of women in the funeral industry and caring for those who are left behind, caring for the dead. Please be a part of this organization. We ask you to start stepping up and wanting to be a leader in the funeral industry so that we can start banding together and making a strong unity to push us all forward and get us where we belong in that equality of the industry.
Thank you so much. We'd so appreciate that. A quick note, all the proceeds from my book sales are 100% going to women's education and scholarships with charitable organizations that support them.
And once again, Lisa, where can they get the book?
You can go to Barnes & Noble. You can go on Amazon. Audible is going to be coming out in about a month or so. And you can get it also on Kindle and ebook. And
one more keynote, if you could tell us where to go to sign up for that women's leadership course and or the summit.
Right. So go to funeralwomenlead.org and go to events, and you will see both the Leadership Academy and the Wellness Summit registration. And again, if you try to get into the hotel when the podcast comes out, we will have a neighboring hotel with backup reservations for you to attend.
Great. Well, Lisa, again, thank you so much. And really, truly, I really think we need to have a follow-up post-summit and leadership, as that leadership course starts to take off, so that we can kind of give an update to our listeners on how the summit was, how it was received, and then how your leadership course is starting to take form and how the women are being involved. So I really believe that this definitely needs a follow-up.
That's great, Genevieve. Just let me know. And maybe you'll have to come on our podcast someday soon, 4 Women in a Funeral, which Funeral Women Lead is sponsoring. We have Ellen McBrayer, of course. As most people know Ellen, she's the new secretary for NFDA. And we have Elisa Carr with Kelco, who's also a funeral director and has a supply company that supports funeral homes. And Melissa Posey-Luce, who is the senior vice president of marketing and communications for Security National Life Funeral Homes and Cemeteries. And we have a lot of fun on that podcast. So you may have to come be our guest and tell us more about the American History Museum and all that you're doing. And your life story, I think, is amazing. So we'll have to get you on our podcast too.
Oh, I would love to be a guest on your podcast. And what was the name of it again?
4 Women and a Funeral.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it. It just sounds fun.
You like the name? Doesn't
I do. I love
fun?
it.
I know.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
We'll be talking about all things from having babies to menopause. Let me tell you.
Oh, there we go.
We go through it as women in funeral service.
That's right. Well, thank you again, Lisa, for everything that you're doing for us women in the industry. And I'm really looking forward to being a part of this organization as much as possible. Thanks.
Genevieve.
Thank you for joining me today on this podcast, and I hope that you will share this episode with family and friends. We look forward to any feedback you have to offer by giving us a review on Apple or Spotify. And always remember, any day above ground is a good one.